alternately, if I had that map to tiles or whatever again, and I wanted to just simply replace it, I can actually click on this button here, click on that, click on bitmap, and then I'm going to select the map that I want. So right now I have this this one, where did it go? Trailer panel right here. And then it will replace it out with that. Alright, so now we have our bitmap, and then we hit this button, Show Standard Map, in viewports, and we can see what it looks like on there, get a little preview. And what it is this is that case of where it's simply way too repeated, because I built each one of these panels out of a separate and distinct row of polys, and then attached them all together. So I'm getting a repetition of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. And that's not what I want. So what I want to do is I'll close this for now, and now I need to actually change the coordinates of this thing to more to match what I want it to be. So I want that bitmap to just get laid on there, you know, in its entirety here. So I take that thing, editable mesh, and I'm going to modify it. Now, unfortunately, you can't see the bottom bit of this menu goes all the way down. There's all these modifiers pertaining to UVs. There's unwrap, UVW map, mapping add, mapping clear, and transform. Right now I'm just going to use the simplest one here called UVW map, and this is the one that contains most of the things that I'm going to need. So when you add that modifier right here, UVW mapping, you see the parameters, you see mapping. These are the different types, and 3D Studio is cool because it shows you what the type is. It has a little gizmo here, like with most things there's a gizmo, and so if I open this up I'll see dgizmo, and then as I move that around, it's not doing anything if I move it in X because it's projected on along X, but anyway, if you move it in Y, you can see what it's doing. It's translating the map around. So I could move it in Z and Y here, and I could move the map around and position it exactly where I wanted it on that object. You see what happens though is it fits it. So usually you want to UV map and encompass the whole thing. For starters, we can adjust the positions of things later, but this one is giving me, just without doing anything to it, a pretty nice layout on the side here. Alright, so now I didn't really have to change anything. Now you can see though, let's just look through some of these other types. There's cylindrical, and so it's going to look like a cylinder. It draws it like a cylinder, which is nice. You can immediately tell what style of UV mapping you've put onto your object. So cylindrical doesn't make a lot of sense for this. There's spherical, which projects it as if it were a sphere, like that Earth example. Shrink wrap is a little bit like spherical, but what it differs from spherical in that there's only a single pole around the back of it. This doesn't have two poles, whereas a spherical map is a little bit, if you had a piece of candy and wrapped it at the top and the bottom, a little round piece of candy. Or shrink wrap is more like if you had that piece of candy, you set it in the wrapper and wrapped it, pinched it all into one, and pinched and twisted it all into one point. Now there's also a box, which could work for this object. I'm not going to use this at the end of this object at the end of the day for this, but it could work because it projects one copy of that image along all 6 axes of a box. So there, and there. And probably, actually, box probably could work if we rotated this thing around. So we'll try that in a sec. You have face, which definitely don't want in this case. It maps one copy of the image to every single face of the object. Useful for some things, not for this. And this XYZ to UVW. This is for 3D procedural textures, sort of sticking them to an object. And sort of stamping them down. So either planar, if we did planar, we would have to map each individual face of this thing. So we say, this one, okay, that's fine. It also works for the back side here. It works for either one. And you can see the defaults worked out pretty well. All right, so it just projected along that plane and it's sitting there. Although it's a little bit taller here. And I want to make sure that it's also going all the way down to here. So I want to come down here and hit fit. Now when I hit fit, it's going to shrink down to the size in both dimensions of whatever you have picked. So it's going to kind of auto-fit that projection, which is what I want in this case. Now, if I want to go ahead and map the front and the top and the bottom, etc., I can go ahead and I go back up to the stack and I add another UVW map modifier, and then I have yet another planar mapping picked, but this time it's doing what it had done before, where it's sort of mapping along this along X here. In this case it says Z. That's probably just because that's the our coordinate system was set to view, so the view coordinate is X, but the actual local coordinate of the object is Z, which is why it's Z here. Now what you can do is you can set that projection axis to be something else. So if we wanted to project the front and the back side, we would project it along X. So we click X, and then it's projecting that. But what we've done is we've actually stamped over our other UV mapping modifier. That's because you need to pick the faces before you do it. If you apply this modifier, it's going to apply to the whole object. So what we need to do, we need to get rid of that. We need to go over here. We need to hit, we can do edit mesh or edit poly, either one. Let's do edit mesh. And we're going to pick some faces. So we'll go and look at either edged faces is fine. I want to make sure I pick the front and the back faces here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag a box around here. I have the front faces. If I hold down Alt, drag again, I can deselect faces so I have just the front. Now I'm going to hold down Control and pick the back. Okay, so I have almost all the back faces picked. Hit Control and add to the selection. Then I'm going to hold down Alt, drag, and subtract those out. So now I have all the faces, they're red there, all the faces that I want to do that mapping modifier on, and I'll go down and pick UVW map. And so now it's the same thing again with, we're going to need to change the axis. I'm also going to turn off edged faces. Edged faces helps when you're picking faces, but can get in the way if you have a dense object and you're trying to visualize the textures on there. So we're going to go down here and we're going to pick X. Okay, so now we have it's gone along here, mapped along there. We just have to do the top and the bottom. What we can do is we can manually move around that little gizmo. And so, as I did before, you can move this around. We want to make sure that we hit Fit. It's usually a good practice to hit Fit. That will automatically zoom it to the extents of that. Of whatever you have picked, the whole object or individual faces or whatever. And then we can also rotate it around. So we can rotate the UV map coordinates, and that will allow us to say, oh, I want the flow of it to go this way or the other way or whatever. So you can make manual changes to it as well. The other thing that you can do is you can use this tool called normal align. So if this weren't, let's go back to, if this weren't aligned correctly, like right now it's projecting this way, we could use this tool called normal align, and then we pick on a face. By picking on a face, you align the map to whatever direction that face is pointing. This is an incredibly handy tool. I use this all the time, this normal align. In fact, I use it more often than changing the alignment, because a lot of times it's kind of easier to just hit that tool and normal, click along there, and then hit Fit again. And then that will, more often than not, give you a really nice UV layout. So let's take that and let's see if we over here and render it real quick, get a sense of what that looks like. Alright, pretty good. But we're probably going to need to edit the material just a little bit, so go back to the material, grab that, and down here, maybe we want to add a little bit of bump map to it. So if we take this slot, drag, drop it on bump, and we say instance or copy. In this case, we can do an instance, that's fine. If we wanted to change some of the parameters of the bitmap itself for each individual channel, we'd hit copy and then we could make those changes, but instance is fine. And so, very good, bump of 30. Let's see if that gives us anything. It's given us a little bit. It's probably, I don't want to over bump stuff. Too much bump is, kind of something that will make something look very 3D-y, and that should be a very subtle bump on that. So, okay, perfect. Very good.